welcome to our audience at home. Um,
I forgot I had to record.
this is a quick workshop on or share out or taste test. I don't know what we want to call it. A moose bouche, like on design in uh, education. Um, so yeah, what I was just saying is I'll make sure at the end to share just a couple resources that are specifically designed, and a lot of work has gone into designing them to be useful to both school leaders as well as anyone involved in school design work. So I think like the good news is the 99 point whatever percent of stuff that we don't get to, uh, you'll have some resources to pull on. Ashley, can I do like two beats of transparent facilitation stuff with you?
Yeah, of course.
One is, given when we're starting, when do you want me to really uh, shut up so that we can get some Q&A and or people can go to where they need to be? I just want to make sure I'm tracking like the right amount of time here.
Let's do this. Let's put questions in the chat for Q&A. I
Okay.
think if we can try to maybe just typically we were saying 15 minutes, but let's just do 5. And I'll try to answer some of the questions in the chat as we go. If I have
Oh,
if I have the answers, and if not, like right, like, or if there are ones that we want to post to the group, then I can kind of lift those in the last 5 minutes.
gotcha. So we are
And
talking.
we're
Yeah.
also, sorry, just real quick, we're also not like, there are other experts in the room. So if you guys have, responses to each other, like use the chat, engage with one another, and answer each other's questions as well, right? This is supposed to be engaging and for you. So
Sounds good. And my other transparent facilitation moment with you is, out of all the stuff we talked about me getting to, do you want to guide me in any particular direction as we jump in here? Because there's a lot.
um I think let's try to get into activity. Like
Oh, okay.
quick, beginning of like what is design thinking, and then let's jump in.
All right. We'll do some of that. So I'm gonna hit y'all with a couple different frameworks that may be familiar. Has anyone seen, use your emoji hand up things? Has anyone seen this particular image before? Okay, I'm seeing at least one thumb. It became very popular, came out of the Stanford D School as a way to codify what design thinking is as a process. And it's relatively linear, despite the hexagons moving up and down. You sort of move from empathy, which I'll say a little more about in a few minutes, to defining a design challenge or opportunity, to ideating, coming up with many, many ideas, to then prototyping, hopefully a few of those ideas in pretty quick and scrappy ways, and then testing that and seeing what works best. So that's one of the ways that design thinking has been taught and thought about over the last many years. But there are many ways that it's been taught and thought about. And one that is very central to a lot of the work that I've been involved in is what has been called liberatory design. You'll see some of the same words: empathize, define, prototype. But you'll also see the context of seeing the system, explicitly identifying equity commitments, understanding the complexities, and at the heart of the process be like this combination of noticing and reflecting. And I think that this is particularly important as we think about power dynamics that may have to do with race, socioeconomics, gender identity, any number of power dynamics just in a school context, hierarchical power dynamics between school leaders, superintendents, teachers, students, families, partners, collaborators. And you'll see also that it's represented in this kind of floral circular way to communicate that it's not always so linear. Sometimes we're moving back and forth between these pieces. So big contribution there. There's also a whole bunch of thinking about like, well, what are the mindsets? What are the abilities of a designer that may not be linear at all? They may not be process oriented, but they're just the things that designers know how to do that could be useful to us in whatever, in this case, education. So here's this graphic that articulates 8 abilities that designers develop that I think can be very useful in our work as educators, as school designers, as curriculum designers, and so on. So that was about 60 seconds and 3 frameworks, right? If you want hundreds more, I've got a website for you. to check out. That asterisk is not an asterisk in the website, but I'm trying to keep it PG-13 for my friends at New Leaders. But it's become almost a joke in the design world that like everyone needs to make up their own little version of one of these, and you'll start to see a lot of overlap. And then there's good reasons, right? People are calling out different aspects of the process that really need, or mindsets or abilities or whatever that really need attention. So I don't look at it as there's one right and the rest are wrong, or that you need to memorize and understand all of them. But I just wanted to give you a sense that like sometimes it gets a little ephemeral or like abstract what folks are talking about, and certainly jargony. What I want to try to cut through to is like the why and so what, and what can we actually do with any of this in a pretty immediate and like practical way. To me, like these two quotes really sum up a lot of what the reason that I keep coming back to design mindsets, abilities, and processes in my work. The first quote some of you may have seen from an educator that probably many of us have known personally, read, heard of at least, Pedro Noguera, who said, "We live in a country where those who know the most about education have the least say, and those who know the least have the most say." And a lot of what's exciting to me about design is the potential to flip some of that and say, we're not designing for people. We're co-designing, we're designing with, we're putting the tools of changing what school can look like in the hands of folks who are most impacted by what schools look like. That's held in tension for me with this quote that I can never find the actual source. And I'm still curious whether he said it, but this quote from Henry Ford, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? There's something about like, it's hard when we're in the mix of things. When I was a middle and a high school teacher, to also solve all the structural challenges and like see the whole system and facilitate design processes, right? So I think there's some balance here of saying like, yes, let's utilize tools and systems and approaches that center the voices of folks most impacted by them. Let's also not, on top of what's already really hard for a teacher or a student, ask them to also magically have both time and perspective and access to resources to do all this. Like, how do we, whatever our role in this moment might be, how do we help to like hold that tension between the quote from Pedro Noguera and the quote here from maybe Henry Ford. So that's a lot of what I look to design to do, is to like help me hold that balance, thread that needle. I might skip this stuff, just keep it moving here. I do want to hit you with like a couple ways that I think this connects to our work, both in education and in equity. This is a squiggle that is meant to represent what the design process can often feel like. And it made me think of what I learned in my teacher education program about the zone of proximal development, and the fact that as learners we're squiggling, and there's this kind of like zone of like learning. In some of the training I've done around racial equity work, particularly with courageous conversations, there's a very similar image and framework that's talked about as the zone of productive disequilibrium. And so in each of these, it's like, how do we push ourselves to the limits and also kind of bring it in to a point where we can be productive and move forward and learn. So just wanted to share that I think there's a lot of synergy between the way that we think about learning, the way that we think about the equity work that hopefully we're all involved in, and the way that we think about design work. Okay, Ashley, now I'm going to try to jump. I don't even know. It might be a lot of slides forward to get us into an activity. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll come out of the slides. And I'm going to ask, this is participatory. So if you can possibly have your camera on, and if you can possibly have your microphone on, we're going to do a little something. And if you're mad that you're being asked to do something, blame Ashley, because she said I should do something that is, an activity. All right. I'm going to ask you to pick up an object on your desk or off your clothing rack or whatever, something you can reach. Yes, Tiffany, I'm shouting you out because I saw you have a more exciting background. So hold that object in your hand. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take turns introducing the group to our object. And the only rule to this introduction is that whatever the object typically, perhaps actually is, the object is not. So for instance, the one thing this is not is a pen. But I'm going to introduce you to this tiny pole vault for hamster Olympics. that they can run with this and then plant it and then jump over something really high. All right. Did that make sense? Everyone have an object and understand what I'm asking you to do. All right. Ashley, I'm going to pick on you because this was your push to do something engaging. What do you have, and what is it really?
So I usually feel like I'm super lame in this, but I kind of like this one. This is my teleportation device to a different time and era. And I'm gonna call on Sam.
This is not a thing to make telephone calls, which actually is not that far from the truth. A small computer device to distract you from doing the work you don't want to do during the day. I'll call on Sean.
Thanks, Sam. This is a ramp for if you have maybe some vintage Hot Wheels cars that you need to be playing with, and it could help them fly at whatever angle you want those cars to fly at. I'll call on Chandra.
I knew. Hi. This is a graffiti making object. It's oblong, and yeah, that's what I do with this object.
Nice. Can you call on the next person, please?
Apologize, Sarah.
This is a remote control that when you click it, it turns on or off whatever you are looking at. And I will call on Tiffany.
This is a swimming pool for miniature size people. You can jump in, take a dip, and swim back to the top.
Love it.
I will call on Mark.
This is a post-it note dispenser for post-it notes that are very hard to write on and don't stick.
I think that was all of our folks with cameras on. Is that correct? Anyone whose camera is not on want to play? Just come off mute real quick and jump in verbally. Okay. We have one. Doctor, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am actually opening a Pedialyte popsicle for my little one that has me home today for his his food poisoning. So I will introduce this as let's say it's a life vest. It is not something that is going to hydrate you, but more so protect you from drowning.
Sounds good. And love thank you for multitasking, taking care, and like still playing. That's a beautiful, beautifully done. Any thoughts on why we would do this game like right now together, but also like if we were with a group at our school and entering into some sort of design, innovation, creativity process? I see Sean in the chat. Start seeing differently. Absolutely right. We're often dealing in our schools with like a finite set of resources or materials, and starting to help ourselves see what might feel familiar, what we might think we know how it is or how it has to be in entirely new ways. Yes, challenging assumptions. This is so good. To show creativity in different perspectives, right? One of the ways we play this game is actually to pass around the same object, and we each have to come up with something, and it can't be the same as what anybody said. And we're pretty competitive, the team I work with at the D school. So we actually turn it into like a game where like it goes around and around in a circle. And if you can't think of something new fast enough, or you repeat something, you're out. And it gets down to two people going back and forth, and it gets pretty intense, right? So that's like one where if we're really trying to show how many different perspectives there can be, like playing it with the same thing helps drive home like, holy smokes. Like I thought of like 5 clever ones, but between the 20 of us, we just came up with 200. It's pretty, it expands the aperture of like what's there, even beyond what I might think at my most creative. And yes, thank you for mentioning joy, Tiffany. Like that's the other piece. It's like, this is hard work. And if we don't ever play, the sustainability of it is tough. So I'm just going to jump back in here off of that and like talk a little bit about kind of the ideation part. If you remember, it was right in the middle of that first slide I showed of different parts of the design process. And one of the things that we try to do is like just get more ideas on the table when we're entering one of these processes. So you see the first thing on my brainstorm slide here is go for volume. Another thing we try to do is be visual. Like, how do I show, not just tell? Can I draw? Can I act it out? Can I use a picture from a magazine to illustrate the idea? Another is, this is obviously super huge, like deferring judgment. And it goes hand in hand with pursuing wild ideas. Like maybe a bunch of the wild ideas are going to not work at all, but we might not be able to get to one that does without trying those on. And I know this has become a little cliche around brainstorms, but it's amazing how often a brainstorm doesn't work this way. How often we shoot down someone's idea before it's even fully out of their mouth, right? Or our own, right? How much we're editing and censoring in these activities. The metaphor for me is like, which of these two kernels is going to create a beautiful piece of popcorn? Like that's our ideas in a brainstorm, right? Like ultimately we're trying to get something like this, at least that's the popcorn I like. And we don't know, like some of them are going to end up like that. But back when they're in those two kernels, like we just have no way of knowing. So it's like celebrating them all, getting a bunch of them in the pan and having faith that we will get to some really nice pieces out of doing that. So, this is one of my favorite parts of design work is it often we want to start by doing more learning, what we often will call empathy work, which is really about like feeling with each other and understanding what each other's lived experiences are. And then at some point we get to a stage where it's like, okay, what can we do about it? Let's jump in and play. I also think it's really important to just debrief those experiences, particularly with an eye toward power dynamics. Are some voices being silenced in that process? How is this process feeling for folks who have less positional power? So often, if we don't check in on those things, what happens is that the folks with the most access to power dominate the conversation in a way that actually doesn't get us to the best results. So I just wanted to share some of those prompts because I think they are often missing from these really fun and generative processes, but ones that can actually be hurtful and counterproductive if we're not keeping an eye on some of these elements. Yeah, I'll just quickly, because the time is so tight, just share a couple other pieces here that I think we can really benefit from in our work in schools. One is trying things early, right? And I don't know who drew this. I wish I could credit it. I have seen it over the years, but it basically just visually articulates why we try to what we call prototype. And it gets a little bit of a buzzword or jargony word, but basically try things way earlier than often in schools where we want to like figure every aspect of things out and then roll it out as a huge initiative. And it's like, what would it look like to try that with 4 kids for a day before we decide we're now a project-based learning school? Or whatever the case is, like what is the smallest, cheapest, quickest way we can try something and learn? And these are some cool examples, mostly from the D school where I work. Storyboarding. You don't even need sticky notes. I mean, this is a sticky version, but you can do it on a sheet of 8.5 by 11, back of a piece of paper out of the recycle bin. Draw out the idea. What would it look like? What would the experience be from like right before the thing we're thinking of trying starts to right after? How would it alter reality for folks in our environment? Right. So it's like just sort of telling the story in a really scrappy doodle kind of way. This is like another great example. It's like before I go build an app or try to raise all this money or procure something, like make a little frame that looks like the screen of an iPad or an iPhone or whatever I'm thinking, and just put paper. And when someone clicks the check button, slide it in your other screen of what would come up next and just see how they interact with it before going and spending a bunch of time and effort and money on creating it. This one's a little more involved, but right, it's like you can even build out a kind of lived experience out of cardboard, right? We're thinking of redoing the entryway to the school. We're thinking of a new classroom design. We're thinking of purchasing some new furniture, like build it out of cardboard, see how folks interact with it, have conversations about it, test it out. So there's so much more we could say about that, but I find these inspiring. I think all three of these are images I got from the D School, and I just think they help provoke me to think about how can we test earlier and faster. And speaking of testing, like, that's a key part of this, right? Once we create something, how do we put it in front of people, and like not trying to sell people and convince them that it's the right thing, but really like trying to just show something and get feedback, get reaction, learn with folks. So those are a couple keys that I find really useful as we're creating new things in schools, whatever that means or looks like to us. Okay, I promised I would share like a trove of resources to make up for the lack of what we can get to in this time. So this is like a huge one. And a bunch of my colleagues and I did a lot of work on this, as well as folks at IDEO and a bunch of like folks in schools all over the country and a bunch of other design, folks who run design firms. It's now been all collected in something called the Co-Designing Schools Toolkit. Much of it came out of a program that we ran for many years called School Retool, which was specifically for school leaders. And we worked with about 1,000 school leaders across the country over a period of several years. These are the big steps you're seeing, these 6 steps on the screen, but each one of those in the toolkit like opens up into like a whole trove of resources. There's a bunch of like practices, equity-centered, data-driven practices to pull from as inspiration, or sort of hack toward, to try little things toward some bigger school-based practices. So if you wanted to, I would recommend like set a timer for an hour and just dig through this kit a bit and see what would be most useful to you right now, and bookmark some things for later, just in case, something you like but may not have a use for in the moment, that you can come back to. So that's a major one. This is one that's not even living online right now. I sent it to Ashley recently as a PDF, and y'all can hit me up and I'll send it to you too if you're interested. But it's a set of what we called quick wins. And they're just like these things you can do in a period of a day, or even some of them an hour. And I just picked 2 just to show you. So one is like putting your desk, if you're a school leader, in the hallway for a day, just to get a different point of view on what's going on in the school. And I know a bunch of folks who have done this and had really amazing experiences. And then I just wanted to show one other that I think is really profound, which is checking on the student safety net. And it's basically just putting up names of all the students in the school or in your department or in your grade or whatever, and just seeing who actually knows each of those students, who has a personal connection, and then having a conversation. What patterns do we see? Who are we missing? What could we do to change this, to make sure there's multiple dots next to every name? Every time I've been a part of this, it's been a really powerful activity. So I wanted to share that one. I'll stop there. I'm leaving up a bunch of websites to work that I am or have been involved in. The K-12 Lab is the group at the Stanford D School that I co-direct. EdTech Remix is one of our projects we're currently working on. Hip Hop Genius and Creative Hustle are books I've written. And Reimagine School Safety is another project we did out of the K-12 Lab over the last several years. These are ways to see design in education in action. And that is my email address. So, please feel free to reach out. And if you want the quick wins PDF or have questions about any and all of this, I'm excited to be in community with y'all. I'm going to come off screen, showing my slides, but I'll drop my email in the chat as well, in case you're missing it. I didn't get to jot it down from up here. All right.
Time for maybe one question.
Great. Let's do one question.
Sure.
If not, we can take the whole 2 minutes to just applaud and tell me how like amazingly stimulating that quick burst was.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey Sam, I could ask something. I transitioned over from the principalship to now I work on the fiscal end, state and federal programs, and it's something that is just always weighed down with compliance. And so I'm trying to inject some innovation in the way that we spend our funds. And so I'm constantly looking for resources and approaches. I see some parallels in this to how we use our state funds, so we're not always just relying on just doing the compliance end.
Yeah. That's exciting. I mean, there was a quote, Ashley, I don't know if you remember it exactly. I shared it in our workshops this year. It came from Ted Sizer, and it was basically about how, like, if you want to know what a school cares about, you look at the budget.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're talking about is incredibly important and at the heart of like what's really going to happen in schools. And I mean, my personal bias, or I don't know if it's a bias, like my point of view is like, how can you break down some of the silos so that you're not only talking to finance people and then pedagogy folks aren't only talking to pedagogy and curriculum folks, and like, how do you get that conversation where like the tech folks are talking to the pedagogy folks, are talking to the finance folks, are talking to the students, are talking to the family, like to do some co-design and co-creation. So I'd be excited for you to like approach that toolkit thinking about that question of like, where are the moments? And like, compliance is real. It's not like you can just flush all that stuff away, but where are those pockets, and how can you bring together folks from kind of across the community to play around in those spaces? That's really an exciting question. And I know from not being a finance person, we always want you in the room to like help us know what's possible and how to be clever and navigate. And some of the most innovative schools I see, that's what's happening. The communication between folks in your role and folks in all these other roles is tight, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to figure out how to operationalize something that looks really different from traditional models.
I would also just saying like leveraging the empathy process to really understand, right? Like how the dollars are getting down to students and like what student impact is and what do students need. And then I would also say that I just did the certificate in educational finance from Georgetown, and it was an awesome course. Highly recommend it. And one of the things that she talks about is that there's trade-offs, right? Especially with ESSER funds ending, districts are going to have to make a lot of really important decisions. And so how do you get on the ground and really understand what students need in this moment of time? Just like Jean said, right? We're post-pandemic. We've never really been here before. And so we need to make sure that we're thinking differently. I mean, we always needed to think differently about the work, but especially now. And so really, using that empathy process, not just empathy interviews, but there's a couple really cool activities that you can do to get a lot of feedback beyond surveys or interviews. So I would highlight that.
Yeah, I just threw in the chat too, like shadowing a student for a full day. Sam, that's probably something within your purview, like you could just plan to do in the fall, and it's super profound. And I'd probably done 100 school visits before I did that. It's very different than like a site visit at a school, which I've done many of, to actually stick with one student all day. And we have a kit around that as well that like recommends some things to think about ahead of time, some things to be mindful of during the day, and then some reflection prompts. But you could also do it, just like, it's a pretty simple concept, but it's profound. So I mean, I would recommend checking out the toolkit and dedicating a day to that. I think it would get to some of the things you were just mentioning, Ashley.
Yeah, for sure.
Sam, which toolkit would you recommend? I'm like trying to figure out how do I, because I'm running out of ideas to like for attendance and like, so like those logistical problems that there are usually a lot of outside factors that have something to do, like parents are not coming just, they show up for what they want to show up for. So like, how do I try to get my team as I embark on this year? Like in New York, we just had our principals conference, and they want parent involvement in everything and engagement, and they develop rubrics and all of these things. And I'm like, there are other factors at play for why they're not coming, but we're being held to like those standards. So a toolkit. Oh, thank you for like,
I know I'm like Mr.
creative
Toolkit.
Ways for, yeah, I love that.
But let me just tell you,
logistical issues.
Yeah, so what I just shared is the positive deviance toolkit for educators. That's a whole other presentation. We can do it another time if Ashley invites me to Hawaii with y'all. But the reason I'm bringing that one up, Tiffany, is because what that one helps people do is say, let's look at our entire, whether it's our school community or our district, and see where is it happening disproportionately well. And then how do we learn? We don't have to design a new process, because probably somewhere one classroom in the school or one school in the district has different results. and they're dealing with the same set of resources and constraints and whatever that we are. How do we find them and learn from them? And so it's great for something like attendance. It's like, who's having really good attendance? Okay, let's find that and let's learn from them, and let's have them teach everyone else what they're doing, not some outside expert who's coming in. Oh, I know how to do attendance, and have you ever been to Memphis? No, I've never been here. It's like, and I don't mean to like knock, like people can still add a lot of value, but there's something really, what we were trying to engender with this toolkit is like, learn from folks in the same school, the same district, the same situation. And so like, one just quick example on that is like FAFSA completion rates. Like you can have schools within the same geography, same student demographics, having wildly different FAFSA application completion numbers. Why? And then this is a real example where like the school that had like more than twice as good completion rates didn't even know they were any different than anyone else. They didn't know they were like hitting it out of the park. They were just doing what they were doing. And it wasn't until folks said, hey, that like that's double what everyone around you is doing, that they were like, oh, I mean, we just tell the students an earlier date than the actual due date. And then when they don't get it in by that date, we like work with them and get it in. But other schools just weren't doing that. So it was like, I think there's something you could probably get from that process that could be useful around something like attendance.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, you guys, we are 5 minutes over. I know that Sam has another meeting. I appreciate you staying on, Sam. I can stay on for a little bit longer if folks need to. I did drop in the chat, and I can do it again, the Google form, and also just a quick plug. Sam and I partner with the Exploring New Schools model, which really focuses on either if you want to open a new school, if you want to redesign a component of your school. So Tiffany, like if you're really thinking about how do I use design thinking to reimagine like our attendance processes and support for students and families, ENSM is that program. It's a year-long cohort model. You're expected to go to the sessions, learn about design thinking, and then implement a prototype / pilot in your actual school. So really using those pieces to enact change and innovation. So we will have a cohort coming up in January, and if you're interested, I can reach out.
Okay. I am in the middle of a doctoral program, but I will try to squeeze
girl.
that in.
Not yet, but maybe in the future. You got to focus on that.
We can always.
All right, Dr. Hicks, I see you.
Or nothing to read. I'm good.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming.
You,
Super appreciate you all. Yeah, definitely fill out the survey, and don't forget to fill out your annual survey so that you can get your really cool speaker. I heard that it's got some good tunes on it. So
you put both surveys in the chat.
One survey, which is just for the town hall and breakout room, you're going to get an individual email.
Oh, in the email. Okay.
Yeah. And if you don't, just email me and I'll get it for you.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Peace, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.